New retirees that leave Canada often overlook these key steps when retiring abroad from Canada, which can lead to unexpected tax burdens and financial stress you don't need down the road. Today, we're going to unpack 9 key steps you must understand prior to retiring abroad from Canada. From navigating tax implications to managing cross-border investments, stay tuned until the end because some of these key steps we're going to cover are truly going to surprise you. Let's jump in. You, like many other Canadians, probably have significant concerns about the rapid increase in your cost of living in this country and the growing lack of affordability you are facing every day. This is the key reason I suspect that you, along with many other Canadians, are considering leaving and retiring abroad from Canada. And I know this because the last video I did on this very topic absolutely exploded in views and is still being heavily watched and shared. So today, we're going to go through some key steps for you to think about before retiring abroad from Canada. But before I share those steps, you might be wondering who I am and why should you even listen to me? Well, my name is Joe and I'm from IA Private Wealth and IA Private Wealth USA. And there are literally thousands of unlicensed or unregistered financial influencers on YouTube providing some sort of financial guidance in their content. The problem is that the vast majority of these finance influencers aren't legally registered to give advice on financial concepts, but in a lot of cases they do. I am a fully registered fiduciary portfolio manager and investment advisor registered in 7 Canadian provinces with CIRO and in the great state of Texas with the SEC in the United States. The content on this channel tends to garner a higher level of trust associated with it because I am registered to be able to provide advice with the securities commissions in both Canada and the US. And with those registrations comes strict regulations and high standards I must abide by to help ensure that I share the most reliable information on financial planning and retirement strategies on each side of the border. That said, please take a moment to read my quick disclaimer here and make sure that you consult with your portfolio manager or investment advisor before making any financial decisions about anything that you see on YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, I want to take a quick moment to thank you all so much as I recently crossed the 1,000 subscriber milestone on my Canadian channel. I'm so very happy and humbled that over 1,000 people would find it valuable to tune into my channel, and once again, I thank each and every one of you. For those of you who have just stopped by, if you happen to like and trust this content, please consider subscribing and hit the like button. It supports the videos tremendously and it helps us reach many more viewers. Thanks in advance for your support. Also, if you're from the US or have cross-border needs, you can feel free to check out my affiliate channel at Joe Macek USA for US retirement planning content. With that said, let's get right into what you need to do when considering retiring abroad from Canada and why you do not leave Canada before taking these key steps. Okay, so you've decided to retire abroad from Canada, and let's start by having an understanding of what determines Canadian residency and how Canada identifies someone as no longer being a resident or an immigrant of the country. And it seems that this distinction is chiefly determined by whether or not income tax is involved, as emphasized throughout the Government of Canada's website, which frequently mentions terms like immigrant and residency status in Canada for income tax purposes. Fundamentally, you are considered a resident or a non-resident of Canada, primarily based on your income tax status. The website goes on to describe it in more detail by saying, generally, you are an immigrant for income tax purposes if you meet all of the following conditions. You leave Canada to live in another country, and you sever your residential ties with Canada. What does severing ties mean? Well, severing your main ties with Canada means you no longer are maintaining your primary connections within the country. This can involve selling your Canadian home, establishing permanent residency elsewhere, and your family leaving Canada or reducing personal and social ties while establishing them in another country. If you leave Canada but retain these ties, you are typically considered a factual resident of Canada. However, if you are also a resident of another country with a tax treaty, you might be deemed a non-resident of Canada, subject to similar tax rules as immigrants. For more details on residency status and ties, visit Determining Your Residency Status on the Government of Canada's website. So when do you become a non-resident of Canada? Well, this is critical to understand because you can inadvertently become a non-resident without realizing it. Again, Canada's definition of non-residency hinges on the concept of residential ties. You typically become a non-resident for Canadian tax purposes on the latest of 3 dates: the day you leave Canada, the day your spouse and dependents leave, or the day that you become a resident of your new country. Now, if you've lived in another country before Canada and then return back there, your non-resident status starts from the day you leave Canada, even if your spouse stays temporarily to handle affairs like selling your home. So there are a few distinctions that you have to know. Next up, we're going to talk about RSPs and other retirement accounts, bank accounts, investment firms, and tax returns. If you maintain Canadian bank accounts or receive payments from Canada, you must inform your Canadian payers and financial institutions that you are no longer a resident of Canada. This helps ensure that your financial arrangements are aligned with your non-resident status, helping you comply with Canadian tax regulations and avoid potential issues. Now, when it comes to RSPs, you can still make RSP contributions up to 60 days into the next year after you cease to be a resident of Canada. This allows you to still claim an RSP deduction even though you've only been in Canada part of the year. So for example, if you leave in June 2024, you can still make an RSP contribution up until March 1st, 2025, which is 60 days after 2024 ends. And when it comes to keeping your RSPs, contrary to what many may think, you do not need to close or move your RSP if you leave Canada. You can keep your RSPs active within Canada, letting them grow tax-free even if you're living abroad. This allows you to help maintain your investments securely and manage them conveniently from overseas without any hassle. That said, if you become a non-resident, your current financial institution might not be able to manage your RSPs or other accounts. Not all Canadian financial institutions are properly licensed to handle accounts for non-residents, which means you could lose these services. Therefore, it's essential to talk to your financial institution or investment firm to ensure that they can continue managing your accounts once you leave Canada. This is something I often see in my practice with Canadian and US residents. Since I'm licensed in both the US and Canada, new clients come to me when their Canadian investment firms can no longer manage their RSPs or TFSAs in the US after they move, or they have me look after their IRAs in the United States for the same reasons. Just know that it's critical to check with your financial institution to ensure that they can still help you if you become a non-resident. Now, when it comes to tax returns, you're required to file a Canadian tax return with the CRA if you find yourself in one of two situations: if you owe taxes to the CRA, or if you are entitled to a tax refund because you overpaid taxes during the tax year. But for more detailed guidance on filing requirements, visit the CRA's Do You Have to File a Return section on their official website. Speaking of taxes, let's talk about the departure tax and non-resident withholding taxes. When you leave Canada, not a lot of people know this, but the CRA deems that you have disposed of certain types of property at their fair market value, even though you haven't actually sold them. This is known as a deemed disposition, and deemed dispositions trigger capital gains taxes. This rule applies to various types of property, including shares, jewelry, paintings, and other types of collections. It's important to be aware of this because you might inadvertently trigger a capital gain on certain property that you have that you didn't expect. This is also referred to as the departure tax, which you may need to report to the CRA. However, there are exceptions to this rule. Certain properties like Canadian real estate, Canadian resource and timber properties, and Canadian business assets used through a Canadian permanent establishment are excluded. Additionally, various registered plans such as RSPs, RIFs, TFSAs, and certain employee benefit plans are also exempt from a deemed disposition. If you are a resident of Canada for less than 60 months in the 10-year period before emigrating and you are not a trust, properties owned when you last became a resident or inherited afterward may also be exempt. With these complexities in mind, it's advisable to seek guidance from a cross-border tax expert. This helps ensure that you navigate these rules effectively and stay compliant with the tax regulations on both sides of the border. Now, when you're withdrawing your pensions and other registered accounts like RSPs, Canada imposes a standard 25% withholding tax that can potentially be reduced to 15% depending on whether or not Canada has a tax treaty with the country that you're emigrating to. Additionally, many countries offer foreign tax credits for taxes paid in Canada on RSP withdrawals, but you should be thinking about a withholding tax of anywhere between 15 and 25%. Selling your primary residence in Canada is also generally generally tax-free for all Canadians. However, if you become a non-resident for income tax purposes and then sell your principal residence, it can lead to tax implications. Under Canadian tax laws and most income tax treaties, Canada reserves the right to tax the sale of your Canadian real estate if you are a non-resident. To help ensure compliance with your tax obligations, the CRA requires the purchaser to withhold 25% or as much as 50% in certain cases of the sale price as security for any taxes owing. It's important to note that this withholding tax is not the final tax liability, but rather just a precautionary measure to help secure potential tax payments from non-resident sellers. To avoid unexpected taxes, consulting with a cross-border tax accountant is critical. They can provide guidance to prevent unnecessary tax liabilities and advise on the optimal timing for selling your primary residence if you're still a resident of Canada. For more detailed information, I've included several links in the description below to the Articles and Government of Canada website, which will offer additional resources to help you navigate this process effectively. Here are some final considerations. Leaving Canada usually includes the loss of Canadian healthcare coverage upon becoming a non-resident, but it's really important to note that healthcare coverage rules vary across provinces. Manitoba Health stipulates that to maintain eligibility, you must be physically present in Manitoba for at least 212 days within a 12-month period. Similarly, Ontario residents can be outside of Canada for up to 212 days in a year and still retain coverage under OHIP. However, in Alberta, it's different. You can keep your AHCIP coverage if you reside in another province or territory for up to a year, but you lose your coverage if you stay outside of Canada for more than 6 consecutive months. Here's the bottom line. Retiring abroad from Canada demands meticulous preparation to avoid unexpected tax liabilities and maintain essential benefits like healthcare coverage. From understanding residency rules to managing financial accounts and property transactions, each step is critical. Remember that healthcare coverage rules vary by province, impacting your eligibility based on residency duration and physical presence. Whether you're planning a move or have already decided, thorough planning and expert guidance are vital to navigate these complexities effectively to help secure your financial future abroad. Did you know that navigating the uncertainties of the markets and your finances is generally smoother with the guidance of an investment advisor or portfolio manager? Studies have consistently shown that individuals who work with investment advisors and portfolio managers tend to accumulate a net worth up to 3 times higher on average compared to those that go it alone. But that's not all. There's a significant impact on overall well-being, with those who seek professional advice exhibiting higher levels of happiness and lower anxiety. Do you want to know an easy way of identifying what kind of plan you have at work? Or maybe you want to find out more about my latest upload? Well, I've got everything all queued up and ready for you. Click here for more amazing financial insights. I'll be waiting. We'll see you soon.